that nice? Little mood music for a Monday. Little dancing logos shimmering on the old TV screen. A little bit too long for the intro sequence, but I kind of like it. Make sure you attribute. You gotta attribute, right? You gotta attribute. You don't give the cloud music. Always count on. If you ever need instrumental music, go with Incompetech. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, third edition of OE Week Live. I've called some colleagues and friends into the studio. We have no script. We're just gonna, talk about things that we're doing, and you never know what happens when you sit around with people and you get to have conversations. And so, I'm going to start. Where should I start? Spin the magic. I'll say hello to Connie Blomgren, who's our colleague, our board member, coming up to us from Alberta. Hello, Connie. How are you today?
I am really well, and I just want to introduce myself briefly, I guess, is what we're doing here, and provide also my land acknowledgement. So, like my name on my little image says, I'm Dr. Connie Blomgren, and I'm an associate professor in the Open Digital and Distance Education Master of Education program at Athabasca University. And I teach and research about openness in education. I'm also an associate editor for the International Review of Open and Distributed Learning. And I'm a member of the Open Educational Resources Advocacy Committee for the International Council of Distance Education, as well as vice president for Open Education Global and their board of directors. I acknowledge and live in the present day Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta, the lands of the Nitspiakyo Blackfoot Nation. My apologies, my Blackfoot's not that good, so I'm a baby speaker. My home is in the traditional territories of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, and the Yurhā Nakota nations. And this area is also part of the Métis homeland. I take personal responsibility to understand our shared history and my personal role in conciliation and reconciliation. Nitsiatik, I am grateful for our shared living environment. And today it's still very wintry, like minus 20 something at lunchtime when I went out for a little quick walk with my dog, who does not like the cold weather.
Yeah, that little snow thing that came through and swept the region a couple of days, and
I'm very thankful for it because here in Alberta they're talking drought and it's serious. So it's good to have cold weather and snow at this time of the year. It's quote normal.
It is, and I'm your neighbor over here to the east of Saskatchewan, and I'm looking out my window, and last year we had snow drifts that were like 15 feet high, and we hardly have any. And like you, we really count on that water for our trees and our wildlife. And we know the weather is part of that cycle, and sometimes it frustrates us, but it's just part of that circle. So we'll zip up north of you to Verena Roberts. I'm so glad you could come on the show, Verena. Counting on to hear a lot of things about you that are going on this week and the work that you're doing. So hello.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here. Connie and I go way back, so I'll just mention that, like, way back. So yeah, we're also in the province together, province of Alberta. So I'm up in Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory, and expanding upon how much I appreciate the cold weather and not at the same time. I did go for a walk yesterday with my teenager son, and we thought it was warmer, and I thought, why is no one here? And I soon learned. Yeah. So our 2-hour walk was shortened to half an hour, but we did get out and hang out in the snowbanks, and he did something new, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, Alan. He dove right into the snowbanks like a wolf. And it was like, and you know what it made me think of? Like ostriches but ostriches when I think of it in an educational technology context and just ignoring the world. And I'm like, that was so not what he meant to do, but that was where my mind went. On the beautiful river bank, he dove into the bank. I work at Thompson Rivers University as an instructional designer with a specialty or focus in open learning. So as someone said to me, students must love you the other day. And I'm like, yes, they all love me. As I'm always looking for open educational resources and open pedagogical practices to support them when I design my courses. And I also am an adjunct assistant professor with the University of Calgary, and I teach teachers how to change the world. There you go.
All right. And I'm looking forward. We're going to circle back and hear about what's going on with the open education talks this year. So that's exciting.
Right.
So like there's all these nice connections. So, I work with Connie, and she didn't even mention being part of our conference planning from last year in Edmonton, and Verena was there, and Todd Conaway, who's going to say hello next, is a colleague that I know from way back in Arizona. He'll tell you where he is now, and apparently he was just talking to Verena this morning. So the thing about where sometimes the networks seem big and small at the same time. So hello, Todd. Give us your location, your coordinates, your whatever you want to say.
Well, I'm north of where we used to be down there in Arizona. Alan and I have a little dustier relationship earlier on. We hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon with my kids and hiked out. We've been on bike races together through some ridiculously dusty Arizona trails. And definitely got to see Steve Hargadon one time, which, harkening way back in the day, was so amazing. And I think his guest, who was the guest that did with the doves or the pigeons? Super famous. Why can't I remember her name? She was, Peggy George, I think, was there.
Oh, so, yeah.
Like way back, and we drove in the red truck down I met you in Cordis Junction, I think, and we drove down somewhere in Phoenix. And anyway, let's see. I've been here at the University of Washington for 8 years. I came here after about 10 years as an instructional designer at a community college I was in Clarkdale, Arizona, which is kind of like by Jerome, Sedona. The main campus was in Prescott. And prior to that, I taught high school English for 10 years. But been here for 8 years. All the stereotypes we had of the universities were true in the community college. All the not as much focus on classroom instruction, more research agendas and this and that. So it's been really interesting. I felt like in Arizona, not only with people like Alan and the community that we had there, was just ridiculously innovative, creative, playful, progressive, fun, all the things. And everything at the university is so damn serious, and so and kind of backwards. So anyway, it's a great challenge. Working with faculty is like, I feel like as a high school English teacher, I would have said I was born to work with mostly juniors and seniors, mostly seniors, but I feel like my purpose is to work with faculty, and I feel really fortunate to be in that position, right? Like, I love my job. And, yeah.
Well, that shows, and we're just come back to anything that we want to talk about that's going on of interest, and especially because it is Open Education Week, and there's tons of stuff going on, and no one can really see it all. But the thing I really like, and because it's not an event, it's not a conference, it's more or less people running their locally relevant things at the same time, and we try to inspire that. There were some questions this year, like, can we do it in the 4th week of March, or can we do it the 3rd week of March? And I sort of consider it, but it's like, whatever week you miss is going to be bad for someone else. And so we don't care when you plan your things. We're going to like focus attention this week, but we're excited to see things going on throughout the rest of the month. And so that's about the best I can do to offer it. So Connie, what's going on for you this week?
Well, we have a panel presentation that's for tomorrow. Primarily the focus is for our students, right? Todd has a good point there about universities. And because Athabasca is an open university and also a distributed workforce, our students are always, they're distance education, online learners. So for us to physically all be in the same place, let alone the same room at the same time is, well, other than convocation, that's pretty much it. So we have a parchment, our Masters of Education in Open, Digital, and Distance Education. So I'm in the role of MEd Director right now, and I just think it's really important that students in our program would be able to look at their parchment and go, yeah, I understand what that open part of the parchment is about. And so I think there's a great responsibility for our program to help our students learn about openness in many ways. It's not just one piece of openness. OER is often the big entry point into all those other pieces. So we have a panel presentation tomorrow, and we have, we have a faculty that are working in open spaces research and are very innovative. So we have Dr. Rory McGreal. He'll be speaking on the panel. He's a UNESCO OER chair. So he's going to speak a few minutes about his role and that global perspective. He's also the editor of ERODL, the International Review of Open and Distributed Learning, which is one of the top ranked journals in education in Canada, let alone being an open access journal. So just really important for, that idea of how do we share out research, past paywalls. So he'll be speaking to that point. We have Dr. Lavina Ewan, who is with our faculty, and she's working in emerging technologies, openness, and artificial intelligence. So she'll be talking about OER and AI and just, some of her thinking there. Dr. Marty Cleveland Innes will be also presenting, and Marty does a lot of great work with Commonwealth of Learning and the various MOOCs that they offer. So MOOCs, of course, have been part of open spaces for quite a while now, and they've developed a different sort of style. I think it's called inquiry-based MOOCs. So, that openness, how important it is for not just for us in Canada or in the global north, but Commonwealth of Learning is very much tied, of course, to that colonial history of colonization, but geographically, all these different places within the world, many that are in the global south, and are looking to education as, making the sustainable development goals real. So she'll be speaking about that. So it's, a short panel presentation, kind of like a smorgasbord, concept, take what you want, a few questions, and as we know, we're all really busy. So that's the primary activity that I organized for our program, and we also have an Ed Doctorate. So many of our Ed Doctorate students hopefully will come by, and it'll be a great opportunity for us to just get together and share our ideas. There are some things happening at Athabasca University. I'm on the peripheral knowledge of what's being organized through our library. So there are some other activities later in the week.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I like that, I mean, MOOCs used to be this thing that were very talked about, and they've kind of become, part of the fabric. And so it's not anything exotic. And, I know, especially from our colleagues, we've seen some great ones, from Taiwan, and all the ones that come out of the UK through FutureLearn. I mean, they just are they've kind of reached some level of maturity, I guess, if you will, and less about, it being for everybody in the world, but definitely being open. So that's really good to see that it's still happening.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 different MOOCs that they offer through a partnership with Commonwealth of Learning. So,
Mm-hmm.
and each time they're offered, they're not like the MOOCs that are offered in China. Like because of my work with Rodel, I sometimes see, some of those different papers that are coming in, and MOOCs in China are, easily 1 million people. It's just, not a problem to have that. So we're talking sometimes maybe 2,000-3,000 people instead, right? Which is still a great number. I mean, and also, educators in Global South or places where access to professional learning, understanding of other opportunities that digital technologies provide, expensive, hard to get, all those kind of pieces. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but it is one part of maybe part of making real the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, especially.
Yeah. So, Verena, like I said when I emailed you, I just heard you on Terry Green's show and getting there and talking about these things that you're involved with. And I said, like, the thing that struck out to me is like there's opportunities to sit around and just have this kind of conversation, which you both went to the campfire metaphor. So what's going on as we sit around this campfire in your world, both with I brought up the open education talks, but I know you're definitely doing a lot more, and would love to hear about your work at TRU.
I love that you brought up the campfire, because I think, Todd, we talked about the campfire this morning too. So this is just weird that we keep talking about similar things over and over. And we talked about the campfire a bit, and because I was trying to define open learning, and I really use campfire metaphor to define the opportunity to come somewhere, have a conversation like this, come in with the intention to learn. So that you are coming in with that, you do have that goal, doesn't matter how or when, and you sit there respectfully, there you go. So you're sitting, I guess we're not doing a lot of moving, but we're sitting and enjoying and being warm. And then you leave and you take something you've learned and you apply it into your world or your context. I think, and I know that we have lots of definitions of open and openness, open education, OER, but I think that one applies to me the most. And this week, I was saying to Todd, I was trying not to engage a lot. Like I really wasn't. And the open education talks, which I will put in.
I'll get it.
There we go. So that you have them. You might already have it. But the OE talks are actually something that's been going on for 3 years, and we planned it. Sorry, did you get it?
I got it.
Yeah. So it's a variety of Western Canadian universities, and the goal was Krista McNutt and I go, we didn't want to do all the work. Have you ever been there, Alan, where you don't want to do all
I haven't figured that out yet, but
well, yeah. So we were done with doing all the work. So we said, we're going to do something where we're just going to have these talks, these, 10-minute lightning talks, and we're going to do it with multiple universities, and it's going to be online. It's going to be free. And then we're going to model that for everyone so they can see what it's like. And then we're going to have to bring 2 friends into the group, the committee, to plan it. That was the plan. And now it has gone on and I am doing nothing. I am like, it's never happened. So this website that I'm sending you has been created by TRU. The U of C is hosting it. U of A is involved. UBC was involved. Christina Hendricks was part of the team, but she was a little busy this year. Like it's been off and on. And it's just so wonderful to be part of something that is sustainable. But then Todd kind of mentioned you don't necessarily want everything to be sustainable. And I know I've heard you say that too, Alan, before. Like some things are like moments and they kind of have, and that's like a great learning experience. So that kind of made me think when you said that this morning, Todd. So I don't know. This one, I feel like I'm moving on from it, and that's okay. I don't think I've ever moved on from an open project before. And maybe I haven't, or maybe I've just pulled back. So I'm thinking about that. And then the cute thing with this was, because, Verena can't not organize something, even though I said I wasn't going to. At TRU, we have our open education, I don't know, what are we, committee? And we had to figure out how are we going to promote the open education talks. And we wanted to focus on the students. So in typical Canadian fashion, we're doing a pep rally. So we are doing an open pep rally, and that means that we got some money and we're spending it on cupcakes and food for students. And we're bringing them into a specific online, yes, or not on, well, you can see this online or face-to-face. And just like at an Oilers game, and I know, Alan, you know hockey well, right? Really, Alan knows.
I've been to one game.
With me explaining what's going on. But we're going to do it right on the big TVs. And so we're going to make it like a sports, like we're going to celebrate it like we do in North America in many capacities in a sporting event. And we're going to celebrate open. And we're going to be like, this is exciting. Mm-hmm. You should know about it. It's cool. And then we have the guest speakers and people can walk by and watch it, but they can also eat their cupcakes and talk to the librarians. And we're sounding very cool. So cool. We had to actually go look up pep rally to see if it's still a word and if we were still cool enough. And we had to check with our children and but we're cool. So we're doing that. And then I just put in the YouTube video that one of my research assistants created for the pep rally. So that is my celebration this week, that I successfully helped coordinate this video face-to-face while being online, to get this pep rally, which is face-to-face. And again, I'm online, but yeah, you can do anything with open. And then the last thing I was going to mention, have I lost the link? Oh no. So the open, the talks though, like you said, aren't all this week. They also go all month, every Wednesday, because we realized that model worked really well. And we have lots of people so many people wanted to tell us about their amazing stories of openness. We also, part of the rule is Verena and others are not allowed to present. That's another rule. So even though I'm tempted, nope, I'm no presentations from anybody like us. But other people, we can get other people. And then on Wednesday, I'm jumping into a panel in Ireland. I got pulled to Ireland with Mags and Kate Malloy and Ewan Costello. I'm not even sure. And that one is just to celebrate open and K-12, because some of you know that I used to be more K-12 and I teach K-12 teachers still, but there's still a lot of potential for growth in K-12. And so I'm still seen as someone who knows about it. So that's why I'm got pulled in. Well, yeah, my dissertation research, wasn't it? So yes, that's what I'm doing this week, even though I said I was not going to do anything. Yeah. And talking to Todd's group on Friday. So good transition.
You've dialed it back. Where is this pep rally happening?
It's on campus. Like if you watch the video, you'll see he shows where it is and everything.
Okay. Yeah.
But you can celebrate online too. We'll talk about it. But it is face-to-face. A face-to-face pep rally for open.
That's good. And I know because I remember Todd knows about giving out food for incentive, right? Didn't you? That was one of your game plans, right?
It didn't work today. It leaves me with like a whole bag of cookies. Like, what is up with that? Yeah. Wow. Huh.
So
my turn?
It can be. Like I don't want to be the turn designated.
Come on, say it's your turn now, Todd. Come on.
Todd. I'm going to call you on the phone, Todd. Todd and I have this thing. We try to call each other spontaneously on the phone, and it's like old school, but like having a phone conversation is quite refreshing. Being away from the screen. So, hello, Todd. What's going on?
Well, I was listening to Verena there, and I will say I have limited OE Open Ed stuff happening this week. And I'm going to say that it's not for lack of maybe belief or whatnot, but just structurally here, we've been through some turmoil over the last few years. And on a positive note, we did just hire an OER librarian. So I'm really excited about that. It's somebody, a librarian here that I've worked with for quite some time, but 6 years ago, we were on an OER team and we did some events, and that dissipated. My team sort of dissipated, and so I'm excited to get something more in the library here, which is great. But we don't really have anything planned school-wide. But I want to talk about small, not MOOC. Maybe less is more, maybe. And I will just share an unintentionally open event that happened to a colleague of, I think, Verena, you might know Chris Lott. Alan, I know you do. He used to work up in Alaska. Now he is here at the UW in Tacoma. He and I dreamt up this thing that we thought it would be fun to chat about, like old dead educators. And like, so we did, we talked about like Kurt Hahn and Neil Postman, not Neil Postman, a little more modern, but Carl Rogers and Freire, Freire's coming up. But one of them was about Carl Rogers, right? So it's just an hour-long Zoom thing. Chris makes this website on the URL is ridiculous. It's sites.uw.edu/ATUWT/ it's this long URL to get to this thing. And the idea was that every month or so we would hang out with faculty and share some of largely my connections to these old dead educators, right? Verena and I were talking about Maria Montessori and active learning today, and how weird it is that active learning is so popular and it's attributed to like some research done last week, when the truth is it's been around for a while, right? So anyway, Chris and I, we're going to do this Carl Rogers one. And so it gets, it goes out on some calendar here locally at UW. He's got this site that has this picture of Carl Rogers and, 4 sentences about, humanistic psychology, humanistic teaching practices or whatever. And, the 2 that we'd done before that probably had about 3 faculty show up for each one. It was average faculty development today, like almost nobody's showing up, even with cookies, right? And there we are waiting in the Zoom meeting, and it was either 5 or 6 people from France showed up. Like these teachers from France showed up, or psychologists, they're like from France. And nobody else was there except us and these people from these French psychologists or whatever. And we had the most amazing time, the 6 or 8 of us. It was so wonderful. And, there we are getting paid dollar bills to work for the University of Washington and help faculty development. And he and I spent an hour just talking to these French psychologists and teachers. And I just thought that was like one of those, it's not a great big thing. It's not lasting forever. It's not this big, long, sustainable something or whatever. It was just open. We didn't even know how it was. We didn't know how they got the URL to the meeting. And there we were. And it was great. So that was good. So that's one of the stories. And the other story I told Alan I would share with it, because both Verena and Alan are part of this or have been part of this. Sometime in the last couple years, I realized that a learning community that I've been a part of here for 8 years, small but mighty, probably 8 to 12 people. It's been going on for almost the entire time that I've been here, 8 years. There is no other learning community at the University of Washington that I know of that has lasted that long. It started out as your typical, like, provost or chancellor funded operation where everybody got some dollars, and we did some things, but we lost all that. And so for the last few years, we've just been doing it because we love to hang out with each other, which is truly, that's really the community or a piece of it. But the last couple of years, we did a lot of the things that your book club does. We read some books, we did some trainings, we did like how to do stuff. We all made our own websites out there, our professional websites. We had some obviously great examples of people who have been doing open education for a long time. But at some point, we wondered, like, well, what else is there? And I didn't know. I still don't know. But I did guess at one thing that was partly, and the way I would explain this, and Alan, I know I've done this before to you, so I'll just do it again. One time, many years ago, I went to this thing called the Cyber Salon in Phoenix, Arizona, which at that point, all I knew was that it was a bunch of teachers that hung out together at bars. And I guess they talked about teaching, but I knew a couple of the faculty that were doing it from the Phoenix area, and I had only heard of Alan Levine, but he was recognized by that little community as one of the originators, kind of this leader in something. So I go down there, and I walk in, and I don't really know many people, and I was kind of nervous. And I sit down in this chair, the only chair available at that moment was next to Alan. And I didn't know who he was until I sat next to him. And when he said, I said, hi, or something, and he said, hi, I'm Alan Levine. And I was just like, oh my gosh, wow.
Stop it, Todd.
What a hero. But here's the thing. I know, sorry. But here's the thing. That inspiration, by being connected to somebody like that, lasted me for years. It was like going to the conference and all the sessions are marginal and all the food is okay, but you meet that one person who you've been inspired by for years and you talk to them for 10 minutes. Man, that is like the most amazing thing. And that's what I get at conferences even today. Like I'm inspired by the people in our field, by people I've watched do things, Who would have known then, this was like 15 years ago or whatever, who would have known that 10 years later, I would have been standing on Alan's porch in this little forested area of Arizona and be talking to somebody like Jim Groom, who at that point, I was like, oh man, Jim Groom, he just is so amazing. And so anyway, so here's the story. So a couple of years ago, I'm like, well, what do we do with our learning community? And I said, well, what if we invite people into our little monthly meeting just to tell us a story, just to tell us something amazing that had happened to them, an epiphany that they'd had about teaching and learning. And so we did. And that has been going on for a couple of years. I don't think it hasn't been every month, but people like Robin DeRosa, and Alan and Jim Groom and others, they are keynote people at big events. Somehow, just by asking them to share a moment with this little learning community of 8 teachers at University of Washington Bothell, we've been able to sit together and I got it to where I could put people in a place close to other people, like I was to Alan that one day, and be inspired by them. And that has resulted in, the little learning community would say they are just incredibly blessed and fortunate and grateful and honored that they have been in the presence of such, really good folks and been able to spend time with them in a small group rather than, row 43 in some auditorium at a conference, and it's just different. It's like 8 people sitting around a table rather than 45 people in rows in a classroom. It's a completely different world, and yeah. So it's weird. I love open. I love like, hey, everybody come in, or put it on YouTube or whatever. But man, I'm not blind to just how amazing it can be to sit in a chair next to one person for 20 minutes and just be so deeply inspired by them that it lasts for a long time. And so Alan has done that a year ago or whatever, and Verena is going to be doing that this Friday with our little group.
Well, I have to say, like, honestly, like, I feel like I get more out of it, and I'm sure Verena will, and that kind of goes with this pep rally idea. It's like some reasons to have people be in the same space, or what it is I don't know. Is this harder to do these days? Is there too many things going on, or is it like not?
Well, that's a good question, Ellen. I think, yeah, well, I mean, you never know until you try. And I don't know, it's like kind of going fishing and putting some kind of bait on your hook. And sometimes you go and you don't get much. And then other times you pull in a great big fish that you didn't anticipate, right? Like, not that I'm much of a fisher person, but it's that idea. If you don't go, for sure, nothing's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do go, I mean, you don't know also to your effect. That's what I always feel is that I think as educators, because like Verena and Todd, I've also spent many years in the classroom with primarily high school students, also teaching English, but other areas too, special education and different areas. So, and you never know your effect, I think. And then sometimes you may run into these once students who are now matured, young adults, etc. And it's sometimes that's when you hear what your effect was, right? So I think to me it's like planting seeds and seeing where sometimes they'll grow on real fertile ground. That's where you think they're supposed to grow. But as we know, sometimes seeds will grow in places where we don't anticipate. So I think sometimes that's maybe, some of what's happening with open education too, is that you have to continue, right? You can't just have like inputs and outputs, right? It's not a straight, kind of situation like that. We're talking about, human learning, many factors at work, and of course being responsive, because you do have to kind of see what's happening with people, where they're going, what they're wanting, what they're needing. And that's both students and faculty or instructional designers, learning designers, educational developers, librarians, all these people that are involved in openness one way or another. Everyone has something to contribute. But also, we all have that opportunity to learn from each other. And that's what I really find about Open Education Week. It's a very celebratory time. And it's really exciting to go to the list of what's possible. Like even this morning, I have lots of things I ought to have done, but I decided to go to some open things because I thought, well, that looks really interesting. That I'm curious to learn more about that. And so I went to that was University of Windsor, and they had a really interesting Anishinaabe pedagogy in a Western OER at the University of Windsor. And so I went to that presentation, and I mean, it was only short, 20 minutes, but it was enough to help me understand what their project was about. So important to think about inclusion, diversity, and Indigenous ways of knowing how to proceed, imperfectly, but we need to work together, right? And I think that's part of what Open Education Week celebrates, is this working together and seeing learning, education as a true common good, right? Like, something that we all share in. And something I think that we need to reclaim sometimes, right? and redefine and all those kinds of things. But it can be small OER, like you're talking about, Todd, sort of that more personal, or it can be, really large OER, right? Or openness. So, Martin Weller talks about that a bit. So, different entry points for different people for different reasons, right? It's kind of big, concept of open education. And so helping people see their entry point into it, and so they can go wider, but also deeper, I think. That's what I'd like to see. But I'm curious, Ellen, I'm going to, you're in that role of sort of seeing, you've got that bird's eye view of everything. And tomorrow in our panel, the question that they're addressing is, what do you see in the near future in your area of open education? So I don't know. Do you see any kind of trends when you look at the whole, smorgasbord of all these offerings that people are, putting up as part of Open Education Week? Do you see anything, because you maybe have a little bit more of a bird's eye view? Do you see some things that are worthwhile to know?
That's a very good question, and the challenge is like you kind of get a flyby view, so it's like being up there on the satellite, not on the ground. I guess I was just thinking. I was just looking at the topics that were in the open education talks, and I think the expansion of our field, if it will, like it used to be kind of small. Like you could rattle off the places and a couple names. And so now there are so many people doing so many things that, and that's very healthy. So I think that part of it is like the groundswell of people, thinking about and trying to go about openness. They're still struggling with, maybe it's basic questions, and, people still want list of links to things, and that's all fine. But I think the sheer fact that I would say more people are engaged with it is really positive. And then, I think, we had a little bit of an interesting conversation this morning about language translation, and it just sounds like something that should be easy and straightforward. But it's so complex. And so, and whether, machine learning can get you part of the way enough so you can go farther with it. And the fact that language is so complex at the same time is, I can be okay with enough of a language translation to have an understanding, rather than going for the perfection magic, science fiction device. So I think there's some great strides. And of course, I'm completely dancing around the 2-letter acronym that's on everybody's plate of artificial intelligence. And I don't know what to make of things. And that's what I want to ask people. But, it's going to shake some things up. And I think we're having to rethink a lot of our ways that we've gone about a lot of this work, which is terrifying and uncomfortable. But I like to think, somewhat opportunistic. But I don't have the good sense on that. But I don't think it's something you can say is going to go on a hype curve and disappear. But there's going to be some kind of disruption, if you will, or and so again, I think having more people, doing their experiments, and so I can't really keep up with. I can't even give you that good picture, Connie, except that that there's more of it, and that's my positive stance. Verena?
I was thinking, so I'm working with Hugh McGuire, actually with Press. He is with Pressbooks, but we're working on a project. Everyone always asks me, what project are you working on? This project we're still working on it, is looking at how we're integrating AI tools into authentic assessment and creating learning design software. And we're doing it from a really human point of view, in that, first of all, when people hear that, they're like, but then Verena, you're putting yourself out of a job. And I just laugh, because I'm like, no, because if you get to the point that you think I'm out of it, that is fantastic. If we've got to that end of that conversation. But so I really don't have that fear. and maybe I'm naive to say that, and this will be used against me in the future, but it's to save time because of those kind of discussions that you're talking about. It's like, really, if I could save time, what would I do so that I can build those relationships with students, so that I can talk to them about open learning, so that I can, share with them different ways of thinking about learning and why we learn and how we learn. And as a result, those kinds of conversations and working with an open business person, I would say, I've never worked really with an open business person before. He at least realizes that you need to bring the educators and the students along with you and keep checking in as you go along. And so it's a really different experience, but it's really helping me learn about AI and the possibilities and the fact that we could maybe go nowhere and what's going on outside and everywhere, and all the things that educators are being thrown at right now with like just ridiculous craziness stuff that we always have every time the new trend comes through, right? And but I'm happy that people are coming to ask, and they're like, well, what do you think, Verena? Like, should I use this AI tool or that? And I'm like, wow, I guess I have a reputation finally that someone's asking me saying about something technological. But still people don't, as we well know, and they just go off and students are hurt and ethics are broken and all that's happening too. But it is pretty big, I would say. I agree with you, Alan. And the idea of the context behind it too, like the data that is being used and how it's being used and where it's coming from. I have a lot of questions about that. But I really want to use it. But if I use it, how can I encourage my students to think critically? And I know my own kids, like my son's I always admit things that they do that maybe they shouldn't. So he's in grade 12 and he's doing in English, his last year of English. And the teacher asked them in a group to write different thesis statements in the beginning of a paragraph, or their intro paragraph, and they all have to write different ones, right? Which sounded like a really great activity, but they could not think of one. Like they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it individually. And then, so my son said, well, why don't we put it into ChatGPT and see what GPT says? And he's like, I was really surprised, Mom, because then it got me thinking. And I'm like, but that's kind of the point. Like, that's how I'd want you to use it. And I was like, but did you tell your teacher? Like, did she encourage you to do it? And he's like, oh no, I'd never tell her.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I'm like, you're not learning how to use it properly. I'll just say if there's a proper way to use it, but you're not using how to think critically. And now you're hiding it. And it's providing this like shame. And yeah, so a lot of that stuff I'm thinking about too. And in open contexts and in closed contexts and in K-12 and in higher ed. Yeah. All that stuff's happening in my mind. The pep rally is way more fun. So if anyone's interested, they can go get a cupcake. Yeah.
Does ChatGPT make cupcakes?
I don't know, but we could try like 3D printing. We'll bring it all in. Makerspace. Flavor of the week, right? Like put them all in 1 week. Yeah.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, and I guess like somewhere, we talked about, the networks and the small and the things that Todd's doing to connect with some people. Like I don't know about people here, but like struggling with the fact that like our communications, like our networking is smeared in so many places. And at the same time, I keep saying it never was one place. But now it just seems like, people ask like, where is the place to go to get connected? And like, I say it doesn't exist unless, you're going to say like the internet, and that doesn't help anybody. But I'm just curious to hear how people are either thinking about this or dealing with this on their own. Like how are you keeping those influxes of information and people like sorted out? Because I'm not managing it very well.
Well, I'm going to call you again this afternoon.
Okay.
So I was talking with Verena about this, and Alan has heard this for a while. I think I need to reinvest and recover energy towards my people, the community that I had, and new people who may soon someday be a part of my community. And I'll kind of liken this to sort of what Marina was just saying, in that, school or learning or life, and I'm going to make all those the same thing, right? Life is school, and school is life, right? And there's so much in that experience that is emotional, that is social in nature, and not out of a textbook or from a lecture or, on a calculator. It's weird because part of me is like, oh, that's dumbing down the curriculum, paying attention to learning how to learn or the social elements of classroom experiences. But it really isn't. And it never has been. That's really what's happening, is that connection, the human connection. And for me, I just got to remember, I have a job. I'm supposed to help faculty with this. But what we're doing, connecting, asking Verena to share her thoughts with somebody, Alan asking me if I wanted to do this is what's important. And it's not either or, but I just need to refocus myself, for me, on the people around me rather than my damn job. That would be my current attempt.
Well, I would certainly opt for that.
Yeah. Connie, what are you using? Because I wouldn't say my life is over because Twitter died, because that would be awful.
Yeah.
And certain people would be really excited to hear that. But it hasn't been the same. That's all.
Oh, I think it's been, I was thinking about this the other day because I was doing some minor course brushing up, and in a couple of my modules that I have for my grad students, I encourage them to go to Twitter. So I had to go in and put X/Twitter, all that changing. But then I started thinking too, I thought, well, is there, I know a lot of people went over to Mastodon. I never did. I always meant to. So I find that it's, there's still kind of people there, but it's not really what it was. And it's really unfortunate, but I think it does show us that, we're always beholden to those companies, right? So from an ecological point of view, sometimes things wither off, right? And maybe it's a time of where there needs to be maybe some recommitment to some new areas, or areas that are flourishing that I'm not aware of. Because I think the networks are really important part of open ed education overall, especially because although, Open Education Week celebrates all these great, things that are happening in different places, at any one campus, it's always just a handful of people that are probably doing it, right? We're still less than 20% saturation on a campus. And in K-12, like maybe you're talking about 0.005%, something like that. I mean, it's, K-12 has lots to learn yet about openness in education in many ways. Like if you're talking about actual OERs, if you're talking about pedagogy, there's other things that K-12 is probably doing that would be considered open pedagogy. So, where are those special places? I think you're right, Ellen, when you say it's the internet, but is there one special spot? Not that I know of. And I think Todd's somewhat, leading us into a good reflection there about nurturing the communities that we're in and how important that is. And I know for myself, that's what I've been thinking about as well. And even, what we're doing tomorrow with the panel, I thought about that, that was in mid-February, and I kind of went, I better do something there because, for all sorts of good reasons. But, It wasn't like hours of planning in a committee or etc. And to me, the primary audience that I'm hopeful appears are our students, because that's who it's for. And like I say, I wouldn't want them receiving their parchment, their graduate degree in open and digital and distance education, and kind of going, what was that open piece? Like, what, right? Like, that isn't good if it's not. That's the thing, is when you integrate things throughout, rather than sometimes really explicitly pointing things out, because the open part of our degree is woven throughout primarily. I mean, we do have a course in open education, which is great, but it's an elective. It's not, required. So, it's like many things. There's many definitions, many understandings of what it's about. So I think nurturing the community that you're in, because if it's strong, it'll grow, right? And people will move to other places, right? And, even today, it was interesting. The power of the network, as they like to talk about, it comes around. But to me, it's the real social network. It's not the internet, and it's not Facebook or any of those social media networks. To me, it's the real social network that has always existed before there was even electricity, right? Human connections, this web of connections, many of those kind of things. So I think that making our community strong wherever you are is really a great part of what open education can be about.
Hear, hear. Well, I think I hope I've had a good time. Not a good time, but in the sense of like pep rally good time, but but it's always good to have this. And I think it's a good reminder. Like the thing, it wasn't Twitter itself that did it. It was that thing where you had chance like brushings and interactions with people you didn't know, because I could see, I would follow Verena, but I would see that she's in conversation with these other people, and that can still happen. So like, I think what I'm getting from you saying, Connie, it doesn't have to be the platform. We have to kind of be above those platforms. And usually, if I run into Todd in some other platform, his Toddness is sort of there, usually. And so I think we should be above like having to be one single platform. That's my kind of stance.
Yesterday, my son and I, when we were coming back from their hike/walk, that was called, we were talking about superpowers and what are our superpowers. And I love having conversations with 14-year-olds because they're really thinking, they ask you really interesting things. So we were talking about super, and I was like, "What do you think my superpower is?" And he said, "You can talk to anyone about anything." And I think that was what Twitter also gave me. But I was like, don't get me wrong, I'm scared to talk to people. He thinks that I don't have any anxiety about talking to people, but I do. And those moments that you're getting at, Todd and Connie, of like, I remember when Alec answered my text, Alec Kuros, he was just doing a session. He's like, "You're right, Verena, that's a good question." Blew my mind. And now I am an open learner forever. But it's that what he sees as a superpower. I used Twitter and social networks in order to expand that superpower. So we need the tools to expand upon our humanity, but yeah, in different ways. But we are always human. And my superpower always was a talker, as we well know, as I finish this up talking.
And that's going to be where it stands. Verena's superpower. Let's hear it for that.
Anyone, anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all listening, answering my call, and joining in this conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alan. Always good to be with you.
I'm going to close out with a little music, and then I'll end this.